Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I'm the facilities manager for the Aurora Mirage, one of those mega resorts that eats an entire city block on the Las Vegas Strip and then stacks a second city block on top for good measure. If you've ever walked through our lobby, you'd remember the cold blast of conditioned air, the smell of citrus from the atomizers tied into the building automation schedule, and the sound that never stops. Slots, chatter, dealer calls, compressors ramping up and down on VFDs behind the walls like a hidden pulse. I know every panel board, every isolation valve, every bad actuator that we keep on the list until quarterlies because the replacement would require downtime. My name is Alex Rios. On the day the strip locked down and then turned inward on itself, I was the one with the keys, the lockout-tagout tags, and the cell phone nobody wanted to ring. It started with the curfew notice and then a corporate directive that came through the chain like a valve going from cracked to shut. Security Director Mark Lafferty met me at the service corridor outside the main electrical room. He had 2 union iron workers from a contractor crew and a crate of welding rods. Legal and corporate claimed we were preventing property damage and mass ingress because the strip was experiencing civil unrest. That's how they wrote it. What it meant at ground level, every exterior employee door would be seam welded, panic bar or not, until we were an island of carpet and chilled air. We would keep our guests inside, no exceptions. We walk the doors, one by one. Any panel that opened to the back-of-house truck court. Any exit from BOH corridors to the alley that runs behind the facade. Even the 2 steel gates that guard the helipad stair at the east tower. The welders worked fast, laying quiet beads that smelled like a hot coin. I watched for spatter near hydraulic lines and noted which panic bars we disabled so I could annotate it in the life safety system. I added a red tag to each welded leaf with the date and my initials. It was thorough, and it was final, and as the last orange arc faded from the northern loading dock, something in my chest fell quiet, except for the whine of the AHU fans in the ceiling above us. The guests kept coming to the front. The main revolving doors stayed open as long as Metro had barricades on the boulevard, but the buses stopped and the valets drifted away from their podiums. Corporate's next order came from a speakerphone in the executive conference room. The call ID said HQ Risk. We were to seal the employee corridors at the mezzanine level, maglocks at 4 cross corridors, chain-link gates in the service hallway behind the theater, and badge readers locked to manager only. The justification was asset partitioning. The effect was that we cut ourselves off from our own lungs. No easy run to the truck court. No way to swing a pallet of bottled water from the dock to the banquet cage. No direct path to the fleet fuel farm in the far corner of the property. I raised it twice, documented the risk in an email, and got a bland copy back. So we built our shrink-wrap bubble around 1,000 people and told ourselves it was smart. By the second day, the buffet was a lukewarm graveyard for pans we should have composted. The show theater had cots lined along the aisles under a gold leaf ceiling, and the gaming floor looked like an airport that never boarded. The housekeeping storage rooms were stripped for linens to make privacy screens. I walked through with Dana Coe, my chief engineer, and Omar Ruiz from surveillance, and we mapped the building the way we always do when something breaks, except now we had to map it for people. Where can you lie down without blocking an egress? Where can a nurse wash hands when the hand sanitizer drums run dry? Which ice rooms can we dedicate to critical storage? Which corridor has 2 exits in case a crowd surges? We pulled floor plans to the foreman room, pinned them to a corkboard, and marked staging, quiet, and security sweep zones. It felt like building a second building inside the real one. We triaged power the same day we realized the strip of neon outside meant nothing if the stairwells went dark. The pool complex was a heavy load. Pumps, heaters, lazy river air blowers, and the public spaces were lighter if you killed the decorative lighting and let the signage dim. On the low-voltage side, the building automation screens showed the loads like a skyline, spikes where the kitchens tried to hold temp, a ragged plateau where the slots and tables lived. The emergency generators had fuel for 72 hours at N+1 if we isolated non-critical circuits. But that was assuming normal occupancy and well-behaved people, not 1,000 anxious guests sleeping where the carpet is thickest. We made it work. We pulled the 400A cam locks from the ballroom distro boxes and ran them through the service corridors to temporary sub-panels we set up on rolling racks. We moved stairwell lights onto those panels where we could, tying in through test switches and emergency bypasses so the egress illumination stayed at code levels even if we dropped the house. We locked out the pool blowers and throttled the circulation to minimum to keep the water from turning. Dana and Benji, our best electrician, coordinated with the elevator contractor. Priya Patel, on site and furious that her office wanted her to leave, and did a drill. Kill main house feeder, observe elevator fire recall, bring up on generator, confirm we could run 2 cars per bank for controlled movement if we scheduled them. We posted call lists for elevator operators. We ran it like an orchestra with half the instruments missing. The first infection flagged on surveillance because Omar watches bodies as shapes, not faces. He saw the collapse, time-stamped at 1:16, at one of the high roller rooms off the executive pit. A man in a jacket that didn't know wrinkles, slumping like he'd been unplugged. The dealer hit the alert pedal. Security arrived and then hesitated because our new world had no procedures that made sense. The man came back up without the arc of confusion we recognize from fainting guests. He came up driven, eyes glassy, moving at the edge of tipping. We locked the room, called the med team, 2 EMTs from the show and a nurse staying with her sister, and kept the corridor clear. I kept the radio on my shoulder silent so it wouldn't transmit panic. Mark, the security director, used his command voice and told everyone to step back, then step back again. We built the theater into a ward because it had controllable air and a real stage to work from. The old show rigging let us hang curtain rails that made privacy lines. We put a hand wash station at each door and posted a floor manager from banquet on rotation. The nurse, Julia Nguyen, claimed the front of the stage. She looked at me and said we needed a negative pressure room. I said we had no spare isolation units, but we had AHU-3M, which served the theater, and a pair of relief fans on the roof we could throttle. We hacked it together, closed return dampers enough to push air out the rear vestibule, blocked the front doors with filtered fans scavenged from a temporary construction zone, and taped the seams with painter's tape. The numbers weren't perfect, but I could feel the slight pull when I cracked a side door. It was the best we could do. Corporate kept calling. This is temporary. Keep the brand tone in your messaging. Law enforcement is managing exterior conditions. Asset protection is your first priority. We stopped forwarding their emails to the frontline leads because they weren't useful, and because the latest one pushed a directive that made me want to rip a panel off the wall. They wanted the employee corridors on the mezzanine sealed with chain-link gates and padlocks to prevent unauthorized access to secured storage. That killed our best run between the theater, the service elevators, and the loading dock. It killed fresh pallets of water in the cage we'd left just beyond the new gate. I asked Mark for bolt cutters and he shook his head. If I cut that lock, I'll be looking for a job, and you'll be looking for one with me, he said. I nodded and said we'd map around. We always map around. So we did. we ran service hallways I'd only used once during a refrigerant leak. We found the dead-end corridor that terminated behind a retail facade and punched through a drywall patch into a crawl that opened into the banquet dish room. We pulled carts along an old linen route and learned that the poly-tilt trucks fit inside the service elevator if you turn them at exactly 30 degrees and you keep your hands clear of the door edges. The laundry chutes were our fastest mail system. We bagged supplies in clean pillowcases, tied them, and sent them down from specific floors to staging volunteers waiting 2 levels below. It wasn't perfect, but when your building is a maze built around a money river, you use the secret paths. Privately, we started labeling them. Omar printed little stickers from a back-of-house labeler. ISAR 1, ISAR 2 for the ice rooms we'd taken as cold storage for meds. Drift 1 for the through-duct drift we used to route a network cable between cameras after one switch went down. Roof East for the access that got you to the helipad stairs when the East Tower was badge-locked. We built a legend on the corkboard and updated it every time a corridor changed state. Some routes we blocked permanently with hotel furniture when we learned they funneled people into tight corners. The ones we wanted, we kept clean and lit and marked with blue painter's tape on the floor. Blue meant verified, green meant under escort, red meant no-go. People want to help until the lines get thin and then they want to be helped. I understand both. The hotel is designed to keep your eyes up. Lights in the ceiling, moving marquee, screens that insist you look. And the back of house is designed to keep your eyes down. Watch the floor, don't trip on the threshold, count the steps to the next fire hose cabinet. We needed a way to get people to do what we needed, so we posted physical schedules on easels. Water distribution times by zone, stairwell clearing windows, med rounds, elevator runs dedicated to mobility-impaired guests. We used radios sparingly because we needed battery, and because the DMR trunked system in the building could not handle 500 nervous check-ins. Instead, we rotated runners and used simple codes. A blue strip of tape across a door meant occupied for care. 2 means quiet room, do not enter. None means check in before entry. The first time we lost a section of power, it wasn't because of the grid. We tripped our own main. The kitchen crews tried to restart too much at once and the inrush hit like a misjudged swell. I was standing in the panel room when the main breakers read it, 3 phases trying to go from quiet to roar in 1 second. The indicators went from green to red, and the 2-second delay that keeps us from destroying ourselves finished the job. Click, silence. The building has a sound even in its sleep, and in that instant it was as if we'd taken our hand off a running dog. Then the emergency generators spooled, and the lights we'd worked so hard to preserve stayed on. The casino went down to diamonds on the ceiling. The theater stayed lit. The stairwells held. We had done enough. I walked those stairwells for hours with headlamps and a handheld meter to check voltage at the test plates, with a maintenance tech at my side. Riley knew, learning the building through sweat. We noted which motion sensors were stuck and which doors scraped. When you have elevators crawling on generator, you need people who can move and not fall. We had wheelchair users with hearts that wouldn't stand heat and people with lungs that needed cool air. We used the service elevators like shuttle buses, dispatching them on scripts. Cars 3 and 4 South Tower, loading levels 1 and 2 only, priority mobility. We posted 2 guards in the North Tower machine room to listen and watch the car indicators in case a car stopped where it shouldn't. You can feel a building breathe when your ears adjust. I know what a healthy panel sounds like. I know when a drive is hot by smell alone. It's a strange gift. The private security group arrived at some point between the day we lost the buffet and the night the theater added a second row of cots on the stage. They came in 3, black polos, badges clipped to belts, earpieces they didn't need. They claimed to be contracted by corporate to ensure continuity. The leader had the posture of someone who wants you to believe he knows how to use a range of tools you can't see. His name was Blake Harlan. He carried himself like he owned our elevators. He wanted the executive tower locked to their team only. He had a letter from someone we all recognized. The problem was that under our life safety system we don't lock out egress, and we don't hand control of critical vertical transport to anyone who isn't part of operations. I said so into a moment that went stone still. "You're the facility," he said, like an accusation. "I'm the one who keeps the stairs lit and the elevators moving," I said. "You are welcome to assist with perimeter, escorts, and keeping people calm. You are not taking the executive tower elevators. Those cars serve med, and they serve water distribution, and they serve evac if we ever get it. You can ride with our operator like everyone else." He smiled a tight smile. We both knew he wasn't done. The second infection flagged in the surveillance room as a pattern, erratic movement on a camera in the promenade near the sportsbook. Omar called quietly, "Alex, that's the third one." I walked there and found security had cordoned off a 20-foot arc and were pressing guests away with stanchions. The person inside the arc was swaying, focused on a fixed point that wasn't anyone there. Julia, the nurse, approached, voice calm, hands visible. Her team came up behind and steered the person toward the side corridor as if leading someone who'd had too much to drink. It was not that. We all knew it, but words matter when 1,000 people are listening. We adjusted the language on our easels: quiet hours, medical rest, private family time, restricted access for cleaning. Words that nudged without inflaming. We didn't need panic, and we couldn't handle it if it came. By now, the resort had eaten its convenience. We rationed bottled water by wristband, color, and zone. We learned the RO plant could still push out enough if we bled it into clean containers and kept the sanitation tight. We posted a crew with gloves and masks at the RO room to ensure the filters didn't go to garbage with one wrong hand. Housekeeping turned into sterile techs, and banquet captains became logistics leads. I took the service corridor that runs behind the kitchens and found the freezer doors taped with sign-off initials. They had a checklist going for the passing hours, the simplest tool in the world. It made me want to cry in a good way. We started the rooftop plan the same day we heard the first helicopter somewhere over the desert. Someone saw a medevac cross the strip, trailing a smoke marker on the downwind. It didn't land, but it meant the sky was open enough for a rotor to thread through. I took 2 techs, Riley and a carpenter named Mendez, and we climbed the East Tower stair to the helipad. The mag-locked steel gate we'd welded shut 2 days earlier felt like a ghost I was angry at. We cut it out with a cordless bandsaw and a lot of swearing. On the roof, the pad was wind-baked and empty, with the circle that says H, faded by summer, and a worn warning legend. Mendez said, "We're going to need panels." We had old show drops downstairs and a few dozen sheets of foam core in the events cage. We had rope, we had gaffer's tape, we had hands. We spelled high with panels, then later added help, and then added arrows we could align for wind. We hauled them up through the helipad stairwell because the elevator motor rooms were too tight. We found the windsock mount rust seized. Mendez hit it with lubricant and a blowtorch until it swung free. We chalked a grid on the pad so we could place panels fast if wind moved. We lashed them to railings with rope because in Vegas, the afternoon wind pulls hard from the mountains, and a loose panel is a guillotine. I turned my radio down to half volume and listened, imagining the sound of a rotor rising and the way it would bounce off the tower facade. The city below us looked like a model. The strip's LEDs still chased patterns as if nothing could ever stop them. At night, we set the theater to low light and walked the blue routes. We learned the smells of each corridor, the sweetness of liquor storage, the stale air of a shuttered retail bay, the metallic cool of the ice rooms. We trained volunteers to clean touch points and then taught them again. We rekeyed lock cylinders to reduce the number of active keys in the building. We put one maintenance tech on panel patrol, hugging the walls with an infrared thermometer to find any busway runs that heated under load. We opened a few extra smoke doors to change the way air moved on a floor where it felt too still. I signed off on more things in 3 days than I sign off on in a month. Blake and his private team kept pushing. They started riding the executive tower elevators without our operators, using a master key they wouldn't say where they got. They took a service cart and locked it with a cable to the elevator lobby posts, a way to make the lobby feel like theirs. Mark and I met them there with one of our elevator mechanics, who was holding a key I recognized from the bottom drawer in the machine room desk. Unauthorized use of elevator control is a life safety violation, Priya said evenly. If you continue this, I will shut down this bank and recall the cars. We will run one car at a time on fire service if that's what we have to do. Blake looked at her like she'd thrown a glass of water at a bonfire. You won't do that, he said. You're not going to strand your guests. He was right and wrong. We would not strand them, but we would not let someone else do it either. That night, Omar pinged me from surveillance with a private note. Movement in executive service corridors after hours. Multiple bodies. No voice on radio. I went up. Quiet. The corridor lights were on a maintenance timer. The air felt wrong. Too warm and too still, like an AHU looped into a bad coil schedule. In the glow, I saw shapes move and then stop before I turned the corner. People don't stand like that. They don't idle with their shoulders set at nothing. I backed away and marked the door with red tape. I went to the mezzanine and added a second red marker for good measure. I wrote it in the legend, XX Service East, no-go. I didn't need Omar's camera timeline to tell me what I already felt. It was inside. We adjusted again. We shifted the med ward flow so critical routes didn't intersect with executive service. We changed the elevator scripts so one car ran up the spine of the building for mobility and the other two stayed on shallow cycles for logistics between the theater and the banquet prep space, which we'd turned into a supply depot. We moved the water distribution into the front-of-house promenade with a security buffer and posted a soothing, firm person at the head of the line, Kiara, a guest services manager who could say thank you in a dozen ways that made you comply. It looked like a clean, lit operation. Behind the curtain, everyone was running. By the 4th day, we could hear the strip more clearly in the moments when the ambient sound fell. It was like the ocean, always there. The distant calls of loudspeakers, a siren cut off halfway through its wail, a helicopter that didn't come our way. Phones that used to show the news now showed stale headlines or nothing. The resort's Wi-Fi was up, but the pipe-out was sick. I walked past the front desk and saw 3 guests pressed to the glass at the main entry, looking at the boulevard like fish watching a larger tank. Our welders had done perfect work. If you don't know where to look, you can't see the beads. It looks like the building was always this way. At the end of a long shift that didn't end, we gathered the core team in the foreman room with the corkboard. It was me, Dana, Omar, Julia, Priya, and Mark. The easel showed the day's changes written in familiar hands. Riley and Mendez squeezed in through the doorway. The air smelled like coffee and metal. We reviewed incidents, a scuffle near the sportsbook that security defused, a supply run that took longer because the cart got wedged in a threshold, an elevator door that tried to kiss a worker's shoulder on slow close. Then Julia said quietly, "We are going to need more water." We all looked at the same spot on the corkboard where the loading dock routes used to be green. Beyond those chain-link gates were pallets with shrink-wrapped gallon jugs, a forklift that still ran, and farther out, the fleet fuel tanks that fed our shuttles, and 2 of the emergency gensets when we're in planned maintenance. Another direction from corporate had turned those into assets not to be accessed without executive authorization. We had authorization, just not the kind that stops a bolt cutter from starting a different career. I said what we were all thinking. We open the roll-up and take what we need. We cut our lock and the chain-link gate. We run a team to the fuel farm and fill the mobile diesel tank as far as we can push it. And we set lights on the route so nobody trips on a pallet strap in the dark. Mark was between a rule book and a life. He rubbed his temple with 2 fingers. If we do it at night, we drift into an unknown. If we do it at dawn, we can see what's coming. The big risk is who else can see us. And what comes in when we open, Dana said. Or what is already waiting, Omar said. We knew the cameras in that area had dead spots where a truck parked last month and somebody forgot to move the angle back. The building tells on you if you're lazy. We were not lazy, but we were human, and we had weeks of small sins to pay for. The private security team would object. Blake would try to claim the dock, but his team was 3 and we were the building. The doors answer to me even when they don't. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked to the helipad and looked east. The rooftops were a chessboard of units and parapets. West, the strip glowed, persistent. A story it kept telling itself. The HI panels we'd lashed to the rails popped like drumheads in the wind. My radio hissed now and then with tiny status checks. I thought about my first year in maintenance, learning which valves on the chilled water loop stick in September, and how to work them loose gently so you don't blow a gasket at 4 a.m. I thought about the hotel being designed for one thing, flow, and how we'd turned it into a new shape with tape and panels and rules. I thought about open doors and closed doors, and how that's the only choice sometimes. We made our plan. We would go at dawn when the light is soft and the shadows are honest. We would stage a team of 8, 2 from security, 2 from maintenance with lockout tools, 2 from banquet for pallet handling, 1 from med to assess anyone encountered, and Omar in a helmet cam, feedback to surveillance so Priya could watch elevator calls for any anomalies while we were committed. We would use the South Service elevator to level B and then take the cross corridor that runs behind the backline storage, currently chained. We would cut it. We would roll past the trash compactors, turn right at the wall where the paint changes to older beige, and then face the loading dock roll-up. We would open it to waist height first, look, if quiet, open to full. If not quiet, we would drop it and retreat. We set that as a rule, look, decide, act. As we briefed, the elevator annunciator panel in the foreman room beeped. It's a quiet ping, but in a still room it lands like a fork against a plate. We all turned. Several car indicators lit at once, calls stacked in a pattern that didn't match our script. One elevator in the executive tower started cycling floors without a recorded hall call. Another landed on a blind floor, sat, and then cycled again. Priya, already reaching for her keys, said, "That's not us." She ran with Mark toward the machine room while I watched the board. The hall call buttons on 2 guest floors glowed one after another, a cascade that looked like someone dragging a finger down a panel. No voices on the radio. Omar's voice came from the door. Movement on 15th, executive service corridor. He looked grim. They're in the elevator lobbies. I felt the building tilt. No, not physically, but the way a problem tilts when a new force enters. We were about to open a hole to the outside at dawn, and the inside was filling with motion we couldn't name, pressing on the vertical arteries we needed for everything. People gathered around the corkboard. The blue roots felt thin in my mind. The theater doors felt thin. The welded exterior doors felt like what they were. A decision we could not undo quickly. We held our plan and we changed it. That's the job. We split the team. Mark would run with Priya to lock the executive tower car controls into fire service and take them out of public logic. We would use only 2 banks for the dawn run, Service South and Service West, which had the best defended lobbies. We posted runners to stairwells on those banks to watch for unexpected traffic. We assigned 2 quiet, strong people to stand within eyeshot of every hall call button on the floors we cared about. Our staff, our guests, everyone who could stand steady became part of the mechanism. The last hour before dawn is when the building is most itself. The AHUs hum, the chillers cycle, the casino lights do their idle patterns, and the people who have not slept have eyes that don't blink for long. We staged at the service elevator with the bolt cutters and the pallet jacks. The med tech, Julia herself, because she refused to let anyone else go without her eyes, checked our crew. "If we get separated," I said, "do not run. Step back to the last blue tape turn, count to 10, listen. Then go to the next blue tape turn and wait. If you can't see someone, do not yell. Knock on metal twice, pause, knock again. We'll answer." Omar had the helmet cam on, feet up to surveillance. He lifted a hand without looking away from his screen, which is how I knew he was afraid. Fear makes you keep your head still. He said, "Executive tower car controls taken by Priya. Service lobbies are clear. South elevator ready." Mark's voice came on the radio, calm as the first day I met him. "Confirm. Executive tower under manual. Proceed when ready." I pressed the service elevator call and watched the segments light in the indicator. Car traveling from level 3 to B. The doors opened smooth. We rolled in the pallet jacks and the bolt cutters and a coil of chain because sometimes it's easier to relock with what you bring than to argue with what exists. The elevator doors closed. The car moved with that slight shift that tells an old operator which way you're going. My hand was on the control panel without touching it. An old habit. We arrived at B, and the doors opened on a corridor that smelled like cardboard and dust. The chain-link gate across the passage looked old and suddenly very confident in its purpose. "Cut it," I said. Riley cut the chain at the clasp. The gate folded back. We moved down the corridor to the loading dock roll-up. The door was a gray wall with a pull chain. We unlocked the hasp, fed the chain, and lifted slowly, first to ankle height. Air that didn't belong to us slid in, cool with the desert night and something else, the outside. We stopped. We looked. Omar's camera panned left, right. Trash compactors outside, the strip of dawn just beginning to line the roofs beyond the wall. Quiet. No movement. "Up," I said, and we heaved. The door rolled into its coil. The dockyard lay empty, the concrete pale in the first light. The pallet stacks lined like a tiny city. I could see the plastic glint where water waited, and further, the dark low shapes of the fuel tanks behind a chain-link fence. For a second, the world felt simple. Then my radio made a sound. 2 pips, the alert you only hear when someone hits the panic on a call box. Priya's voice came in tight. "Executive tower lobby, movement at the doors. We have multiple car calls lighting simultaneously. We're holding, but we have pressure at the lobby glass." We all turned our heads a fraction, the animal part of our brains trying to map 2 places at once. The dock open, brightening, full of the things we needed. The inside filling with something we couldn't quantify, pushing at the places where people meet machines. You build buildings to separate conditions, inside, outside, public, private, safe, risk, and then you learn the seams. "We go," I said. "Team 1, water and back. Team 2, fuel. If we see anything, we drop and retreat. No heroics. The building needs you more than the loading dock does." We rolled. Pallet jack wheels climbed the threshold and then found their groove on the dock. We moved like we'd practiced. The dawn light hit the panels of the HI on the helipad above. Useless to anyone on the ground, but beautiful in a way that hurt. The resort behind us did what it always does. It breathed, it beeped, it hummed. The hall call button somewhere inside glowed like tiny eyes. We counted steps between pallets. We counted the seconds between radio calls. We could feel the building in our bones. That's where I'll stop the record for now, with the door open to the morning, the fuel tanks just ahead, and the call lights in the executive tower rising without a caller. We had a choice. Hold fast inside and risk the lights becoming a wave we couldn't outrun, or open to the world and risk learning what waits when you undo a weld and show the city your throat. We chose to act, because that's the only choice that builds anything that lasts. Whether it saves you depends on the building, the people, and the hour you pick. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.